episode of Hashtag Hear Her Story, the WAG's International Day of Girl podcast. I am Anjali, and this podcast was originally recorded in Spanish with our guest and then translated into English, Arabic, and French by our translation teams. This podcast has been developed to complement the hashtag Write Her Story, the WAG's International Day of Girl 2021 activity pack. The activity pack takes you through finding the cause you care about, planning an advocacy project, and then delivering it. Remember to keep listening to the end of this podcast, where we will set you a social media challenge relating to the second section of the activity pack. We really look forward to seeing your ideas. Last time we talked about what advocacy means in girl guiding and girl scouting, and how advocacy can be led by girls. It's all about empowering girls to choose the issues they want to advocate on, defining the change they want to see, and influencing decision makers they have identified to improve their lives and the lives of others. We believe that every girl can do advocacy from a very young age, but parts in advocacy can vary greatly from person to person. Some people start as young members. Some don't even start till they're further through their guiding experience or even later. You will know from the first episode that we can get great inspiration from other members of the movement, listening to their stories of advocacy. But did you know we can also look at external organizations to get inspiration? We're going to start exploring this with our guest. I am here with Innis Alberico. Before you meet her, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Innis has a degree in political science, specializing in public policy, political communication, and campaigns. She worked as campaign coordinator for Change.org Argentina, and she is currently in Germany as a fellow for the Helm-Schmidt program in public policies and good governance. Hello, Innis. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Hello, Mercedes. Very good. Thank you for having me.
We formally introduced you, but now I would like to introduce yourself in your own words. Who are you? What would you like us to know about you?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. It seems to me a very nice idea to be able to be here talking with girls who are interested in advocacy and want to create change. I would like to tell you about what I'm passionate about, what drives me, and that is advocacy. I really feel I'm a person who is not silent about injustice. In the little things like any act of abuse or discrimination, when we're walking down the street, or something bigger that inspires to create a national campaign to make my country a fairer place. And I think that is a little bit what guides me in my day to day. Also, one of the things that worries me as a young woman interested in politics is apathy. Something that worries me a lot is seeing people who feel like being involved in politics or participating are useless or nothing had changed. I really believe advocacy is a transformative tool, and that's what I like to present about myself. I would like to work so that more and more people can participate in politics and to unite their voices for positive change.
Wow, I totally agree with you. We also want to know, what does advocacy mean to you? And what were your first advocacy experiences? How did you start on this advocacy path?
It basically has to do with being able to raise your voice and not doing it alone, but together with other people, bringing people together to change an issue or raise an awareness among other people. And this can be done on many levels. Many times we think that advocating must necessarily mean working on a very large campaign, for example, for a change at the national level. But the reality is that one is also advocating when, for example, a friend talks to a friend and tells her about some problems so you can generate empathy and work together on solutions. I think there are different levels, and I believe it is very important tool that I have in my day-to-day life. Well, one of my first experiences was when I was in elementary school, and I was 10 or 11 years old. I am from the city of Buenos Aires, Argentina, which is a very large city. And when I was walking down the street, I saw that a lot of water was being used to clean the sidewalk every time. And I remember that I was worried that so much water was being wasted. So I decided to create a Facebook page and a group called Let's Stop Wasting Water Washing the Sidewalks. And at that time, I didn't know anything about campaigns or advocacy, but I think that was the first time I ran a kind of awareness campaign inviting my friends digitally. It was the first case I remember. My parents tell me that since childhood, when I saw a situation, I questioned it and reflected on it. And I think it is important not to assume that things have to be the way they are, but to decide that maybe we can change some of the things we see as negative. And if someone else sees it and decides to act too, together we can achieve something bigger.
What you just mentioned is such a good example of what girls, for all of girls listening to use as an example, to know not necessarily they have to create campaigns that reach high levels of governance, but just the little things that they can do at their homes, on their computers. These little actions can start big changes. Following following this plot, what topics are you currently passionate about or interested in being able to change or achieve through your work?
Well, since I was a child, the topics that interest me the most related to advocacy and awareness are two. On one side, the issue of environmentalism, the issue of wasting resources like water or the public policies the government can generate to protect the environment. And on the other side, the rights of women and girls is something that, as a young woman, I feel a very deep empathy for. And it is something that interests me to be able to work. And in my job at change.org, I worked on many issues related to health, animal rights, and education. But the reality is that these two issues are the ones that reach me in the deepest. Now I'm involved from an academic instance through studying a postgraduate degree and then really want to work developing public policies for the government in Argentina and perhaps also at a regional level. Also, to provide more opportunities for girls and increase the opportunities to study, develop, and live in a world without violence, and the protection of the environment, creating public policies to protect it and combating climate change.
Yes, precisely. I think that these two issues are central and relevant at any entry level.
And it is very important to add voices and know that each small action can add a lot. Each one from their place has the possibility of contributing to a more equal world for girls. I think that when we were kids, the reality was different, and today things for girls are slightly simpler. And when they grow up advocating for their rights, they will make it much simpler for the next generations.
I totally agree. And I hope that everything continues to change for the better. As you mentioned before, you were campaign coordinator for Change.org Argentina. Change.org, for those who do not know, is the platform where almost 200 million people in 196 countries participate to generate change at local, national, and global levels. What kind of campaigns did you work on, and how was the process of involving people to achieve these objectives through these campaigns?
As I commented before, there are many initiatives in change.org. Most importantly is to take every request considering the story behind it. And this, I think, is essential point when starting an advocacy project. The type of campaigns in which I worked are, for example, in which a boy or girl needs a medicine to be able to live, which is a campaign that seems small but changes the life of a family and also sets a precedent. there was a case of lack of access to a medicine that is very expensive called Spinraza, and a family started a campaign for a child to obtain the drug for a spinal muscular atrophy disease that affects the body development, which then ended in all children who needed to have that medicine having the right to receive it. Even campaigns like this one, which was very important to me, related to national public policies to pass a law to protect children from sexual abuse and to ensure that the state can investigate and intervene in these cases to protect girls and boys. The campaign was very complex, and what to do when a campaign is difficult or has complicated issues? Well, trying to make it simpler and understandable. When you begin a campaign, it is important that their objectives and the problem you want to solve are simple to understand for everyone. Also, it is a good exercise to go and tell the story and explain the campaign for which you want to advocate to your parents, your friends from school, a neighbor, a salesperson. That way you will also see if everyone can relate to it, because if only you can understand what the problem is, you might need to find simpler ways to express it to make it more relevant. And also add an essential component, that is emotion. To get people involved in a campaign, it is also important to give emotion. That is why the best way to do a campaign is to do it from your feelings. I think those are the two essential tips when we start the process of involving people.
The reach of this change.org page is incredible. Currently, the International Day of Girl campaign aims to get girls and young people to create advocacy campaigns to achieve changes in their environments. What recommendations would you give them to start and continue their projects?
First recommendation, and my message to you is cheer up. You always have to start somewhere. And keep in mind that starting an advocacy campaign is not easy, and that is not something that you achieved overnight. So you have to be patient. It's also important to get together with other people who want the same thing. Because when you start a campaign alone, it is very difficult to go against the world to change something by yourself. But that is something very nice that your guiding association has. That many girls and young women can find who want to work on the same topics as you and together take it forward. To start, you have to think about something that you think needs to change. It can be something very big, such as gender inequality. Perhaps you can contribute to it in a most concrete way in your context. I will give you an example. We had many campaigns about the dress codes in schools where men were required to dress differently than women, who could not wear long pants and had to wear skirts. This is a very special campaign which one thinks of as something very small but changes the reality of a school, and that sets a precedent. So think about what is needed in your school or your neighborhood that can inspire you to start a campaign, and start it from a story. Make it interesting. You have to sell the campaign. It is not to appeal to people who only support but generate real interest. That's why it is important, the visual factor. It is also important, if you are doing a digital campaign, a good photo, and if you are doing it face to face, generate some action with posters or interventions to draw attention to a campaign. And another tip is to start with a small campaign that is easy to win. Although it seems like a thing that is not so important, because the first campaign one gives you the impulse and the motivation to start a bigger one. Start for something simple to grow to something bigger that requires a more complex advocacy work.
Thank you for all those tips. We're taking note. During the last year and half, the pandemic meant that many of us were unable to leave our homes and that we were able to interact with these changes in a different way. So we also had to change how we planned our advocacy campaigns. What do we have to take into account when creating digital advocacy campaigns. What advice would you give your girls and young women to advocate digitally?
Um, the pandemic implied a new appreciation of the virtual world. We can connect with people who are in different parts of the country and the world. Using change.org tool for digital requests allowed you to get support from people that you might not be able to get gathering signatures on paper. And when you start a campaign, you have to think about the recipient. And there are two types of campaign. A type of campaign awareness aimed at society, such as awareness not to throw cigarette butts on public roads. And another type are advocacy campaign that seek to change something, such as, for example, in the case of the dress code, the action is directed at the school officials. Every advocacy campaign is directed toward a specific recipient, and you must plan how you are going to reach those people. It's very useful to reach them in social media if is someone in a governance position is likely to have a public email available to use. Know where you can reach them and how you are going to deliver your message. In social media, it is important to leave a hashtag to trend a topic. It may be through a challenge or a TikTok related to your advocacy campaign, making it interesting and try to create a trend. That is good thing about social media as false news go viral, good things can go viral too. You can use social media to viralize your proposals. How to visually zone is essential and keep it short and interesting like a TikTok or a Reels from Instagram. Those 15 seconds are the ones you have to capture someone's attention to make them interesting in the goal of the campaign. Go to the main point and find an interesting slogan. You can also organize into groups to trend something by commenting at the same time typing on a social media like Twitter using the hashtag of a campaign. That is why organizations are and planning are important. Is preferable to take a little more time to have a campaign that is well planned and that is really going to create an impact and be disruptive. And I believe that with the number of girls from WAGs, the campaigns that you may start will be very successful and can really have an impact. So, I encourage you to take advantage of social media. They are a very important tool for advocacy because people spend a lot of time on it and we can get something positive from it.
Totally. As long as we know how to use it, they're a wonderful tool that we have at our hand. Our campaign for the International Day of Girl includes an activity pack called Write Her Story, in which we ask the members of our movement to create and share news headlines about girls that they would like to see in the future, and then work to achieve it. What title would you like to have seen in the future regarding girls and young women?
I would love to read a lot more news like this year, 1 million more girls finish high school and start studying at university, or a change in advertising that today highlights the body image of girls and women instead their intelligence and strength. I also would like to read more about women in positions of leadership, and I would imagine that in 2030, there are as many women as men in positions of leadership in companies and in government, or having the same number of women and men as heads of government. Well, and to get there, we have to overcome obstacles such as access to education for women, the difficulties that women face when they want to get involved in politics. This is why it is so important to reach girls and young women who want to be involved and so that would see me in the future and and so that would see me in the future.
I totally agree that those are the headlines. Hopefully, it happens soon and we don't have to wait so long to see it. And finally, our association has approximately 10 million members who are in 150 countries. What would you like to ask a question to the young girls and Girl Scouts who listen to this podcast so that they can respond through their social media using hashtag Hear Her Story.
Yes, I would like to know first what bothers them and they think it should be different. What would they change at a global level, thinking in utopian way? And also how they believe they can contribute to that change locally in the immediate surroundings, such as schools, neighborhood, and others. How would they contribute locally to a global change? I would really love to know that and be able to interact with you, and for you to know that there will always be someone else who will surely have the same interests and can join your campaign.
Well, for those who have heard Innis's question, please go to your social media and answer her using hashtag Hear Her Story. As you work through the second section of the hashtag Write Her Story activity pack, you will see this is all about writing your own headlines with a game to get you thinking creatively. We really want you to think about what you want the future for our girls and young women to look like. Do you want to see more females in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics careers? An end to gender based violence? Or even dreaming big equality across all topics? Make it something you really care about and you really will be inspired to and driven to make change regardless of all the barriers you face. Now, on to this episode's challenge. What's your dream headline about girls and women in the world? Write it only using emojis. Post your emoji headline in the comments of WAG's social media post about the podcast and try to guess what other people's headlines are. In the next episode, we will be hearing from another external organization, and here's a little spoiler. Young people were there to attend conferences, debate on social economic issues, political issues, or even other issues that are fundamentally topical, which may not be necessarily talked about at school, which allows us to learn about what's happening more around the world and to know the action that should be done. And even know the solutions to meet a lot of those motivated, inspiring people. I think that is really the root of my commitment. Finally, we would also like to take a minute to thank the amazing team of volunteers behind this podcast, including our volunteer team of Camilla, Mariam, Barbara, Mercedes, Mino, Fehrizoro, Anjali, and the WAG staff team, especially Elsa and Maria, and the music from bensound.com.